Empire. Gonna pick the brain of one of the best in the biz as we take a look at the ever-changing NFC and the ever-compelling New England Patriots. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Football Jones podcast. I am Mike Jones. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Instagram @ByMikeJones, on Twitter @ByMikeJones. And as I said, we're going to talk to Jim Trotter of the NFL Network, longtime NFL columnist. Truly a guy that I look up to in this business, one of my mentors. He's got such great insight, and he was at that San Francisco-New Orleans game on Sunday, and so, that could be a preview of the conference championship, and so I wanted to talk to him about that and also get his thoughts on the New England Patriots and how things are shaping up with them and AFC. Again, just a really great mind, and wanted to treat you to that. So here we go, my visit with Jim Trotter. We're here now with one of the best in the biz, the living legend, Jim Trotter, Lord Trotter himself. One of the guys I really look up to in this business, expansive knowledge and network. You really, if you're not following him already, you should be. Lord Trotter, I really appreciate you coming on for a little bit.
It's my pleasure, King Jones.
No, I'm just the squire. Remember, you got to remember. I'm trying to be like you. So I wanted to, you saw obviously one of the games of the week, the 49ers there in New Orleans, two of the elite squads in the NFC. What was your takeaway from this 49ers team? Because I feel like every week they keep on answering more questions about their legitimacy.
There's no question they were legitimate before this game, but in their minds, they felt that they needed a victory in New Orleans to kind of get over a hump. Because if you recall, they had gotten close against Seattle and they lost at home, and they got close against Baltimore and lost on the road, and both of those defeats were by a field goal. And so for them, in their mind, this was another marquee matchup against an elite club that they really wanted to show that, you know what, we're not into moral victories. We want an actual victory, and to show that everything that we're doing is justified and we're worthy of all of this. And that's why that game was so big for them. They stayed out on the road for a week. They go into one of the most hostile environments that you have in the NFL. And then to have adversity early, to give up touchdowns on each of their first four defensive series, to fall behind in the fourth quarter, give up a long touchdown drive to Drew Brees in the last couple of minutes, to be able to answer that in the fashion that they did was really important for them. So from my standpoint, it's just one of those further confidence building moments that's going to make them very formidable, going forward and into the playoffs.
Right. I feel like we've known that their defense was really good, but there's always been a question about Jimmy Garoppolo, and it seems like he's steadily trending upward, I guess, at the right time. What have you seen, and from your talks with them there, what are they observing out of Jimmy?
No, there's no question he's trending upward, but part of that too has to do with, they go out and they make the trade midseason for Emmanuel Sanders, and that's been big for them because the one thing they lacked, was a guy who could be considered the number one wide receiver. And then the other thing that happened prior to the Baltimore game is that their running game had not been as effective, and some of that may have been due to the injury to George Kittle, and because he's such a dynamic force not only in the pass game but as a run blocker. And they got back to the running game, against Baltimore, and then that's able to set up some things that they do then against New Orleans. And the thing that was really interesting in the New Orleans game is how many chunk plays the 49ers had against that New Orleans defense. All the way I think there were 10 plays of 19 yards or longer, including the longest being 75 yards. And then you've got the 39-yarder to George Kittle there in the final minute to help set up the decisive field goal. So Jimmy's playing really well. The only questionable game he's had of late, you could say, would be the Seattle game where Bobby Wagner told me after that game that he felt late in the fourth quarter and whatnot that they had picked up on Jimmy's his reads and his verbiage. So that's really the only game where you could say maybe Jimmy struggled a little. But Mike, the thing you have to give credit to here also is Kyle Shanahan's play calling. I mean, he was dialing it up against the Saints, and there's just no other way to say that. We've known forever that, what a tremendous play caller he is. And in previous seasons with the 49ers, they just had so many injuries that, he couldn't do it the way he wanted to do it. But now we're starting to see him open up that playbook, and it's a sight to behold.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, they can just hurt you whatever way they want, which, I mean, when I look at the other teams in the NFC, I don't know if there's anybody better than these guys. Obviously, Seattle had their number in that first one. But where do you think? Do you think that they stack up as the team to beat in this conference?
Oh, I think they're right there. The Seattle game, I always kind of toss that out because it's a divisional game. And as you know, divisional opponents know each other so well that regardless of record or anything else, it's typically a dogfight. So if you set that one aside, they manhandled Green Bay. They come back down in New Orleans again, where New Orleans has been lights out at home and so successful, and face a lot of adversity early and never blink. So from my standpoint, I think, for me, if I'm choosing an NFC team right now, that's the team that I would ride with right now to say if I'm picking a favorite to go to the Super Bowl out of that conference, it would be the 49ers.
Now, I know that you spent some time with John Lynch. He was getting some shopping tips from you, some fashion tips and things like that. But what is he saying about how this thing has all come together, the vision that he and Kyle Shanahan have shared, because they are lockstep building this thing, their vision and everything. But what does he think of how the way this thing is unfolding?
No, I think he's happy with it. He's pleased with it. The last couple of years were really rough on those guys, because they both come from backgrounds of success, and to go through the struggles they had in San Francisco, there were a lot of folks that were wondering how was the marriage going to work between the two of them if there were struggles, because, Kyle's reputation was for being very intense, not dealing well with things that didn't necessarily go the way that he believes they should go. And then you have John Lynch, who one of the nicest guys around, but very focused, even as a player, on what it takes to be successful, not willing to put up with any sort of BS. And yet their marriage has worked so well, and I think they complement each other in terms of, not overreacting to things, keeping their eye on the prize, those sorts of things. So the funny thing is, when I talked to John, who is from San Diego, where I live, and I remember covering him as a high school kid, at times I wonder, is he really enjoying what they're doing right now? Because, so much is out of his control at this point. When you're a player, every week you have an opportunity to put your fingerprints on a game. But when you become the GM, you sort of stack the roster before the season begins. You make a few tweaks during the year, and then it's kind of out of your hand. It's in the hands of the players and the coaches. And so I see this sort of just nervousness, if you will, or anxiety, kind of before these big games, knowing that, he can't really impact it, and yet he's just so into it. So in some ways it's kind of funny to me, but it's so noticeable to me.
Yeah. How do you explain those? I mean, this is a guy who, a lot of GMs, they work their way up, their interns, then their scouts, then they're, but he doesn't have a lot of experience, but he is getting a job done despite that.
Yeah, I think he's got talented people around him. I think one of the things that, when you step into a situation where maybe you're not as experienced as you should be, the one thing you want to do, and really this should be in any walk of life and in any management position, you want to surround yourself with people who know things that you don't know, who have, some expertise that's better than yours. And then you all sort of collaborate. And ultimately, he has the decision, the final decision on some things, but you want to hear other viewpoints. You want to rely on people who have expertise and a history of doing certain things. And I think John has done that. He's surrounded by really talented people in that front office. He's surrounded by also an owner who is willing to give him a lot of leeway in terms of whatever he needs to get the job done. And I think he's thriving with that. So, if he were one of those guys who came in and said, you know what, I don't have a lot of experience, but it's my way or the highway, I think it would have been a much tougher transition for him and for the organization, but that's not necessarily his way.
Gotcha. So, okay, we know that you believe that, San Francisco is maybe the team to beat. I agree with you.
I think the Saints are right there too. I don't want to discount them. When I saw Drew Brees after the game, I said to him, he said, we're going to be all right. And I said, I know. And I said, it's going to be fun to watch you guys go forward. And I think it wouldn't shock me at all if we see a repeat of this. And one of the best games I've ever covered in my life was a playoff game between the Saints and the Niners. Back in, I think it was 13, the years all run together now, where Drew Brees and Alex Smith went toe-to-toe down the stretch, particularly last 4 minutes, and Alex Smith ended up prevailing. But it was just one of the greatest playoff games I've ever been a part of. So if we could see this again between these two organizations, history says it should be fun.
Gotcha. So, okay. So do you think that we kind of, everybody talks about Russell Wilson, obviously the Niners, are we overlooking the Saints just a little bit?
I don't think we're overlooking them. I think we know what they are. Look, their whole thing, and I happened, I talked to Sean Payton on Friday night as he was headed to dinner, and he had a big concern and going into this game against the Niners that, hey, we're down 2 starting linebackers. And while some might say Kiko Alonso and A.J. Klein aren't big names, and so what's the deal? It doesn't matter. It matters an awful lot when you're playing an offense like San Francisco, where you have to be very precise, you have to be very detailed, and you have to communicate well and be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And if you're off just a little bit, Kyle Shanahan is so good at exploiting that. And I think that's part of the reason we saw so many chunk plays in the game, is that the Saints did have a couple of new defensive guys in there. And you got to be on point when you're playing San Francisco from a defensive standpoint. If you're not, what happens is what we saw in that game.
So I want to shift over to the AFC because obviously the Patriots, the defending champs, they're not quite right now. What do you make of them? I'm not talking about the video stuff. We'll get to that. But first, just as on the field, their product and everything, is this just Father Time creeping up on Brady? Because we used to praise him for being able to elevate the game of any average Joe that they plug in there. And right now, that offense is not clicking the way that we've seen.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is an indictment of Tom at all. I think Tom is still Tom. For the most part, I think what you see is that what I see at least is just from a passing game standpoint, a complete lack of chemistry. Mm-hmm. And at times receivers aren't separating, and then at other times they're on a different page from Tom. How do you correct that? I don't have an answer. Typically, you correct that through repetitions with each other. And if you've got different guys in and out of the lineups, if you don't have a true number one. The other thing is their running game has not been the same as it was a year ago. When they struggled in the pass game last year through the first 3 quarters of the season, they were still searching for an identity, much like now. And what they ultimately decided was, we're going to rely on the run game. We're going to go basic. We're going to go, 2 tights. We're going to run the ball. And they did, and that was their identity. It wasn't sexy, but that's what they did. This year, without Gronkowski there, the run game has not been as effective, and in part the pass game hasn't, also because of Gronkowski. So I just think, in my opinion, it's just that the pieces don't match up right now, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing.
I don't feel like we should give up on them, because I remember last year everybody was worried about their defense, and then come week 16, they shifted to another level and they've been dominant. You know, they carried them throughout the playoffs. They were really dominant. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they get something figured out with this offense. But what do you think as far as their postseason prospects?
No, you never give up on the Patriots. You know, it's one of those things. It's never over till it's over. I hate to use cliches, but we've seen them enough to know that when you start to discount them, it's usually where they rise up and all of a sudden make you look silly. So no, I wouldn't discount them. The thing that I would say though is that I'd be fascinated to see them in Baltimore again, because Baltimore's offense is when you see it for the first time, there's just no preparing for it. And you can try and simulate it in practice, but there's no simulating Lamar Jackson and, you know, the blocking angles and schemes and the size and power that they have up front, that sort of thing. But Bill Belichick is typically very good when he gets a second look at a club. And I think they would be more familiar with what they are facing and how to defend it if that were to happen again. So I still think that the Ravens are the class of the AFC right now. And if you're going to beat the Ravens, in my opinion, you're going to have to outscore them unless you just have a tremendous defense, you know, like San Francisco has. And you also have the weather in that game. But you're going to have to be able to outscore them because they will put up points. And I think it's a testament not only to Lamar Jackson and to that offense, but also the coordinator, Greg Roman, who has done a tremendous job building this thing around Lamar. And lastly, I would give credit to the organization in terms of, and the coaching staff in terms of John Harbaugh, and saying, you know what, you can't dip your toe in the water if you're going to make this change with this quarterback. You've got to go all in, and everything that you do has to be done to accentuate, you know, his skill set, and they've done that.
They do, and that takes a degree of humility too, right? To just kind of scrap what you've been doing and say, we're going to reinvent, because so many times we see coaches who have an idea, they've got a vision, and a guy has to fit into, but they've just completely, like you said, they're like, we're all in, we're going to do what it takes, we're going to build this thing around this kid the right way.
No, there's no question. And I think that's, to me, that's a sign of good coaching. Anytime a coach starts to say, you know, you're going to do it my way, regardless of whether or not it fits your skill set, I think you're on the road to disaster. And the one thing I love about Bill Belichick is I remember one Super Bowl, and I can't even remember which one, they've been to so many, where, you know, he got up in his press conference and he was asked about personnel. And he essentially said, look, we could go out and seek the all-pro players, the big-name players in free agency and whatnot. He goes, but that may not be what we need. We need players with specific skill sets to fill specific roles. And that's how he built his team. And, you know, you see other clubs starting to do that. The conversation I had with Dennis Allen about his defense and how a few years ago the Saints defense was historically bad, not just bad, but historically bad. So how do you begin to turn that around? Well, one, you start to bring in better players, but not just better players, but players who can fill specific roles, who have a specific skill set. And that's what they've done there as well. So to me, that's good coaching, where coaches and the personnel department are married up to say, look, we need certain things. Can you find these type players for us, as opposed to this player, man, he's the best athlete out there and he does this really well. But if you get him, you're going to have to change some of the things you do as a staff. No, that's not what the really good teams do. So I give a lot of credit to John Harbaugh as well as these other coaches who say we have to fit what we do to the skill sets of these players.
Gotcha. Before, I know I got to let you go soon, but I wanted to get your take on the latest Patriot thing. The scout, supposedly they say they were filming for a web show. It looks bad though, just given their history, does it not?
Yeah, no, it does. But I can't really speak on it, to be frank, because I don't feel that I know enough about it. And so anything that I say would be said from a standpoint of ignorance, which isn't fair to them, and ultimately can only make me look bad from it. So I need more information on it. But no question, just from a perception standpoint, from a historical standpoint, for the Patriots to find themselves in this situation again, where this is even being discussed, is not good.
Good deal. Hey, classy dude, one of the best in the biz. Now, do you have your workout? Have you been to the gym? You know, if you guys don't know, this guy is a workout warrior. You should go on Instagram and check out some of these pics. Um, what's the workout
No,
today?
you know what? It's not a workout warrior. The workout will be later today at 4:30. What it is, and this is the God's honest truth, Mike, and you'll learn this as you get older. We all know Father Time is undefeated. So several months ago, it might have been 4 months ago, I go to put on some clothes for work, and you've got these suits you have to wear for TV and whatnot, and they have been, tailored. And all of a sudden I can't fit them. The jacket may not want a button, and the pants definitely don't want a button. And so you kind of have two choices then. You can either go out and buy a whole new wardrobe, or you can do the right thing and get back into an exercise routine. And I decided that for as long as I could, I would try and get back into, sort of an exercise routine. And the only reason I post up on social media is twofold. Is one, to kind of recognize the people who are leading our classes, who have been instrumental in helping to get me back in shape, and to give them some praise. But then also to hold myself accountable, to say, you know what, I did put in the work, here's the proof. And now if we go weeks without any sort of reminder, then it tells me that, you know what, you're not doing what you need to be doing. So that's really all it's about, is just trying to stay healthy and fit my damn clothes.
And make the rest of us look bad. No, but you also inspire me too, because I'm like, okay, I gotta keep getting after it, so that way, I can look half as good as you do. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
if it helps, I'm good with that, man. I'm all about all of us getting healthy, because we don't know how much time we have on this earth, so take advantage of it, and being healthy is part of it.
Absolutely. Well, tell everybody where they can find you. Obviously, NFL Network, but on your social media platforms, where should they be following you?
Jim Trotter _NFL is my handle on both Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. What's your game this weekend?
The couch. I'm home this weekend, bro. I get a bye week, I've been told.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, where am I? I'm Houston at Nashville to see what happens with the
That's
AFC
a good one.
South. Yep. And I'm sure we'll run into each other down this stretch of the season or in the playoffs.
All right, brother. We'll keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you. All right. Hope you guys have a great week. It's going to be another compelling slate of games this weekend. And we'll see how it all plays out. This thing can come down to the wire in the NFC and the AFC as well, for that matter. And hey, this is the best time of year. All right. Talk to you guys later this week.